What would you ask a lawyer if you could ask them anything? My brother and I opened up an answering machine to allow friends and family to do just that. The questions we received were remarkable. So remarkable, in fact, that we decided to turn them into a podcast. Now, while this podcast isn't legal advice and it's just for fun, we think you're really going to like what you hear. With that being said, my name's Nathan Beam, and I help run a personal injury law firm in Melbourne, Florida.
My name's Riley Beam, and I'm a personal injury attorney.
And from the law offices of Douglas R. Beam, this is Good Questions for Bad Days.
Hey guys, so I make donuts at home, and the county's website says it's legal for me to sell my donuts out of my house so long as I clearly state the goods are homemade. But if someone were to get sick or choke on my homemade product, what should I do? Is there anything I can do to protect myself before I encounter a situation like this?
A few years back, I was traveling home for Thanksgiving, and I decided to stop at an unnamed fast food restaurant.
Right.
And I ate a sandwich that tasted funky. I took 2 bites, and I said, "This is no good." And I threw it away. And I got back, and I was visiting with you and the rest of the family.
Right.
And I like passed out after dinner. I was just so exhausted, and I woke up sweating. Needless to say, I couldn't drive anywhere. I couldn't get back home after the trip. I was so sick. I had to stay where I was, and had to go to a doctor there, and they had to, take a bunch of samples from me to see how I was doing. And I ended up getting a call from the Center for Disease Control,
Right.
checking in and saying, "Hey, you have a pretty severe illness that if you get around chickens, you'll kill all of them." And so I had to explain to them that, they said, "Are you around birds?" And I said, "Aren't we always around birds?" I said, what proximity, right? But with that being said, I ended up getting this agricultural disease from this restaurant, this fast food restaurant. And when I tell people that I went there, they're like, "Of course you got a disease at this restaurant, right?" And, this is colloquial, right? This is just like amongst friends. But there's a sense that I have a liability and that I should have had an understanding that in going to this restaurant, I was going to get crazy sick, right? And, I'm not going to name the restaurant or anything just for, the sake of discretion. But is there some sort of liability that diners take on when they're buying something from a restaurant or they're going to a home-based restaurant, anything like that?
Right.
Do people take on liability?
You could have, they call it mitigating. So if you go to a restaurant and for some reason they bring out a plate of food and it's clearly raw chicken, and you're like, "You know what? I'm going to eat this thing." The restaurant could go, "That was a mistake. It was obvious. You ate it because you wanted to do a lawsuit or whatever." Now, going to a restaurant and just going, "Oh, you assumed the responsibility of getting sick because you went to a very terrible restaurant," that's not a good defense. I would love if they said that at trial, "Why'd you eat here? Are you stupid?"
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen?
Yeah. You caused this. This is you should pay the restaurant money.
Yeah, what are you doing? So if they want to use that defense, then that's great. But, most of the responsibility is going to be on the person providing the food. They have a duty to protect who they're serving food to and making profits off of and all that. They have to protect the consumer. So, beyond that, if you find a bone in your soup or something, a finger or something, and you decide to eat it still, that one's a little bit on you too. So, that most of it's going to be on the restaurant. So don't blame yourself if you just picked a bad place to eat that has a bad reputation. That's not your fault.
That's great. That's great. And our caller has this home restaurant they do for fun. It's a quote unquote pop-up, whatever it might be, right? What can they do to protect themselves as restaurant owners? Because they don't want to get people sick. But in the case, something happens along the way, someone sneezes into the bag, I don't know, a dog licks the donut, and they eat it. What can people do to protect themselves from, catastrophe? Whereas a business owner, they want to provide a good and they don't want to get people sick. What can they do to make sure that in the case disaster strikes, things are okay?
Yeah, you'll want to look at buying an insurance policy if you're selling a lot of food and you can afford it. That's a good way to protect yourself, really, in any business. You'll want to have insurance. You'll want to follow the federal and state food handling policies. If you want to document kind of your work areas that you have, that's always a good idea. And if it's a 50-50, should I serve this food or not? Or even if it's a 98-2, I'm not quite sure about it. Err on the side of losing a little bit of your cost of the good. But that's tough. And even if you do a really good job, it's not going to be 100% safe all the time. So there's always a risk. But the more reasonable you are about your setup, the more care you take in food safety, which most food people in the industry would say that's number one, clean handling of food. And then so if you take that seriously, it'll be harder to bring a claim against you, number one. And then if you do have insurance and a claim successfully brought against you, you have some protection there.
To think of all of the problems that could be avoided if we had great insurance policies and just stopped eating sketchy fast food sandwiches. Am I right? Well, listen, if you're starting a food business, get an insurance policy, treat your customers right. And if you're facing a legal issue, particularly a personal injury one, call us. With over $100 million in settlements and verdicts for families in Central Florida, we've gotten pretty good at what we do. And in the 35 years we've been open, the reviews and the word from the community, I think, is representative of that. So if you're facing any sort of legal issue, you should call us. If we can't help you, there's a really good chance that we know someone who can. And hey, if you're an attorney who's listening to this podcast and is looking for co-counsel in Florida, you should also give us a call. We regularly work on multi-million-dollar cases and would be happy to help. You can reach us at 321-723-6591 or at dougbeam.com. And from all of us, the law office of Douglas R. Beam, we really appreciate you listening, and we're looking forward to answering more good questions for bad days.